Hello, everybody. Friday night, time for show to, and it'll be a little fun one tonight. We got a little time invested in this. Basically, if you really think about it, since I was 6, we've been thinking about Bigfoot. So pushing 47 years and a few months and a few days in there. Already got people sliding in, and really happy to see this guy, Midwest Bigfoot researchers. Randy, how you doing, my friend? And we also got Lenny in the house. So we'll give a few minutes for people to slide in. Anybody wants to say hello. And I also need to make a correction off a question I answered and kind of was ho-hum and very nonchalant about the answer. So first off, let's get rid of that. The fact that I said calories, to lose weight, calories in, calories out. While that statement is true, there are caveats to it. Thyroid condition can make it difficult. And there's a condition that women get, PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome. Sorry, syndrome, not system. Polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a horrific condition. Judy, how we doing? Good to see you. I'm just correcting myself, or I should say clarifying myself on the comment I made about losing weight, calories in, calories out. Polycystic ovary syndrome makes it very difficult for women to lose weight. And again, low thyroid, growth hormone issues. There are conditions that make it difficult, not impossible. So while the statement is true, some people just get dealt a really crappy hand. They're going to have to work a lot harder than anybody else. So with that being said, I apologize to anybody that took offense to that or wanted to call me out, which is fine. Please do. I always welcome call outs because it makes me think more how to make sure that when I do give you guys information, it's good information, it's comprehensive information, and it's not just backyard jargon. So, and I appreciate everybody coming in on a Friday night. Anybody who watches this post, thank you. Always appreciate the views, appreciate the chat. I really like to keep the chat involved because of the fact that otherwise I feel like I'm talking to myself and I should be just locked up in a straight jacket where I could talk to the rubber walls. Anyway, tonight we are going to touch on, we're not going to go over the entire history of Bigfoot. That would be a 72-part series due to the amount of history with it. We are going to touch on how has Bigfoot suddenly became like a social media star. I mean, it's amazing now with all the apps and the information you can find, both good and bad. Not all information is good information. But how did we get here? What brought us to this point? How did Bigfoot go basically from always known throughout history to Native Americans to I do believe we are talking the first, what they call credible, according to the internet, report was by a European European explorer, and he was a fur trader, David Thompson. His journals recount finding footprints, and his descriptions talk about possible Sasquatch encounter as far back as 1811. So, you know, Bigfoot's been in North America for a long time. There's been Bigfoot reports all over the world throughout history. You've got all kinds of different variations with the same habits. Obviously region dependent. Abominable snowmen aren't going to be breaking trees, but they can be throwing rocks and things like that. And every continent except Antarctica seems to have some variation of this. I mean, you're talking, you've got your Yeti, from the Himalayas, which some credit as some of the best Bigfoot footage or evidence with the shipped in photos. You got your Yowie in Australia. You've got your Almas or Almasti in Russia. Your Orang Pendek in Indonesia, which is a much smaller version of what we got here. More like an orangutan type than the types that we have here in North America. You got your rock apes in Vietnam. There are several stories that have been surfacing lately about the Vietnam vets speaking out on the rock apes. You've got your Mapenguari. I probably butchered that, but that's in South America. And there's literally hundreds of other names for what we call Bigfoot. And depending where you are in North America, what Bigfoot's called. You've got your grassman, your Sasquatch, skunk ape, wood booger. Wood booger, that's the one that cracks me up the most. But where we would come up with that, Midwest Bigfoot Research is the internet Bigfoot big, like here on YouTube. Exactly. Once that internet hit in 2000, let's see, really exploded when the internet first started popping up in the forums and stuff, and then YouTube started putting things out there too, but we'll get to that. So what we're doing is we're going from this photo, which is the petroglyphs that are famous, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 years old. Then we've got your encounters, at 1811, like I spoke of, David Thompson. 1884, there's starting to pop up people finding clippings in newspapers and other journals. And in 1846, 22-inch footprints are found. And then we make the transition from there, as Bigfoot is being passed around through the legend phase, and Native Americans speak of them as being more than human, spiritual, predators, cannibals, all the above, depending on where you were at and what they were doing. Midwest Bigfoot researchers and that stupid show, Not Finding Bigfoot TV, helped too. Yeah, we're going to be talking about them, that's for sure. How can you talk Bigfoot popularity not being associated with that? So we go from this, and then, of course, to this. And to me, this is where Bigfoot became reality. This is from the film in 1967. This is an enhanced version. Obviously, it's a little bit better. But we got to there, and then we transitioned to Harry and the Hendersons. And then we go from that, and now we get into the 2000s, 2025, and now we're here with one of my favorite AI photos. Bigfoot has gone from mythical to center stage of being memes and AI photos. If this one were a little bit taller, you probably could say it was a picture of my family, but none of my family are quite that short. More like this. So, how did we get here? How did we get to this point from this Bigfoot to early years to this? And how did it endure? That's the big question. Think about it. A couple hundred years since the first account, credible account. Obviously, Native Americans have been passing down generations to generations. But at the same time, you've got, once explorers hit and started taking over, things were just kind of legends being passed around. And then you hit 1958. And I think this is where you went from Native American legend and lore to this is where the public media starts to pick up on Bigfoot. 1958, you got Jerry Crew and Andrew Gonzoli from the Humboldt Times, who find 16-inch footprints. And of course, everybody knows about the big press conference. And if you don't know about it, they had a press conference showing casts of tracks they found around lumber equipment and logging equipment that had been vandalized. And, the guys were half-heartedly blaming it on Bigfoot. They found those tracks, they cast them, and one of the reporters in the audience happened to say, "Wow, that's a Bigfoot." And it forever stuck. So 1958 is kind of where it hit the press, and it kind of became, people were talking about it, but at the same time, it was, you're more made fun of for seeing it. People thought you were crazy for seeing it. And, as weird as it sounds, people thought there was only one for a long time. That was a big theory. It was one that just happened to be popping up all over the country and maybe comes once a year or something like that, which maybe that's why there's only very few babies. Anyway, so 1958 hits the press. And in 1967, that is when we get this. You get the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is still the gold standard of Bigfoot. So, I mean, we're pushing 58 years now, if my math is right. So, this is the film that got people's attention. This film was even in the theaters. Amy, never heard that before. Looked it up. Bluff Creek, California, near logging operation. Yep. So that's where the term Bigfoot came from, Amy. And then we get the Patterson-Gimlin film. And this film gets people talking. This film makes it, as they were actually shown in theaters at one point. And controversy galore, obviously. A lot of us know the history. Bob Gimlin, Amy WC, the film's everywhere in the 70s. Absolutely. But even before it was enhanced, I mean, that's how popular it was. Midwest Bigfoot researchers, don't forget all the old newspaper articles of the wild. And yes, I forgot about those. I did forget about them. I even had them on my notes, Randy. Thank you. Yeah, back to 1884, where the newspaper clippings started, that they're finding. So there's probably still more out there. So in the 70s, we get this. It's everywhere. People are talking about it. And then that's when more people start coming forward. People start actually talking about experiences. Now, most of them are brushed off. I don't think very many were taken seriously, but, as time goes on, we do find out the fact that it was being looked into a little more seriously than what we were led to believe by the government. They were looking at hair samples. There's a video that just came out with an interview from a person who was doing recordings about linguistics around the United States, and one of them happened to be a Bigfoot interview, and that is in the Library of Congress. So it's not like the government hasn't known about these things, or the elected officials will say, I forget about the G word. So the elected officials knew about this, knew it was going on. And, there's even rumors Teddy Roosevelt created the national parks, is a refuge either to protect them, to give them their space, or protect us from them by giving them their space, depending on how you want to look at it. And if you get into that, which makes a lot of sense because of Teddy Roosevelt's secondhand encounter, the Bauman incident. So, kind of lends credibility if Teddy Roosevelt was writing about it. So mid-70s, we hit Patterson-Gimlin. And then the films start to trickle out after that, about experiences. You get the Legend of Boggy Creek. You get they actually had a couple films, In Search of Bigfoot, not the TV series, believe it or not. And one of them actually they were both, one was supposed to be a documentary. One was kind of a para-documentary. In Search of Bigfoot actually had John Green in it, who's obviously a very famous Bigfoot researcher. Unfortunately, no longer with us. And then there was also that film came out in 75, 76, and in 1975, there was In Search of Bigfoot, Cry Witnesses, and obviously Boggy Creek was in there in 1972. But Patterson-Gimlin is where things started to gain traction. And movies started to come out. Reports were taken a little more seriously because people just couldn't prove that film. Even back then, they couldn't disprove it. They did take a lot of heat over it. At one point, Bob Dylan even wished he had never seen it because of the amount of bullying he received, we'll say. I like to refer to more as a lot of BS that he received. And personally, I'm grateful he's finally being redeemed and respected in this matter. So you got films trickling out, some of them are, and they portray Bigfoot as everything from documentary to raw evil animal to even sexy Bigfoot, we'll say, in certain movies. And then 1980, things kind of, died down a little bit. You had the occasional TV shows, which for me, 1977 was the airing of In Search of with Leonard Nimoy when they showed the Patterson-Gimlin film. And, that's where I was told that was at Grandma's house. So that's where it began for me. I know it began that way for a lot of people, but, as the 70s dwindled on, Bigfoot kind of, as far as I know, but, we didn't have the internet back then, the popularity began to wane a little bit as far as putting it in the media. Then you get into your 1980s and Harry and the Hendersons hits, so obviously a smash hit of a movie. And as far as I'm concerned, some of the best special effects in the movie, especially when you take into account the fact that at the very end, when Harry goes back to his family, you can see all the Bigfoot start to appear, and the fact that they didn't use any editing process or special effects for that. They were actually just standing still in their costumes and would step out. So that was how good those costumes were. And pretty much can explain why a lot of people will walk by them in the woods and never even know it, maybe catch a whiff or things like that. But 1987, all of a sudden, Bigfoot was everywhere. Everybody wanted their own Bigfoot. Bigfoot was, a big, like a guinea pig. Everybody wanted to come up and give it a hug. Uh, so that's where we picked up steam again. And then more films would, trickle out again, more B horror flicks, things like that. But now the reports it was still sketchy to talk about. So, and as it was mentioned earlier, whether we like it or not, You know, you had films like Willow Creek that came out. I take that back. Finding Bigfoot did come out first. So in 2011, May 29th, Finding Bigfoot hits the airwaves. And of course, I was on it because up until then, all we had was like Monster Quest, you know, episodes here and there. Monster Quest was on in 2005 was the first. No, I'm sorry, 2007. So 2007, you had started getting some Monster Quests trickling out. You know, that kept it Bigfoot kind of in the mainstream media. If I remember right, the first one was called Ape Attack, and that was the one that had Dr. Jeff Meldrum in it on the island. When even on camera, something starts throwing rocks and hitting the cabin, and they all huddle inside the cabin, and they're all actually freaking out. So it was rather comical because you're actually going out to look for Bigfoot, and then as soon as somebody thinks they found him, off they go. Tail between their legs. That's it. We're done. So that was what you're there for. Why didn't you go get him? No, go hide in the cabin instead. Anyway, 2011, Finding Bigfoot hits. We get the whole cast and crew. We get the contrast in styles. You got your Matt Moneymaker. You've got your Bobo. We've got Blue Rider, who wasn't in Finding Bigfoot but should have been. And also got your skeptic, Renee, who was going to say no matter if Bigfoot up, and gave her a pat on the butt. You know, that would have been a bear. Cliff and Bobo. Bobo the comedy relief. Cliff kind of the science of the team. And you really needed those four because the only one who did it well before that, I'm drawing a blank on her name now. Expedition Wilds. Right, you never know my identity secret. Yeah, maybe he was behind the camera or something. But yeah, so you had to have all of them because you didn't have one person who was capable probably of carrying that show. You needed four for that show. And depending on who you listen to, you know, the editing made things seem a lot more than what they were. And believe it or not, it lasted 12 seasons. I didn't think it went that long. I think I quit watching after like 6 or 7 because it was just more of the same. You know, it got to be where I felt like I was watching repeats of the same episode, just in a different location. You know, different quips from Bobo, some different arguments from Matt, some different cynicism from Renee, Cliff just being Cliff. And some of the I got tired of some of the goofy stuff they did. You know, the rave in the middle of the woods. Yeah, it's out of the box, but you're also out of your mind. And I'll agree there because of certain things, and so it just got to be repetitive. You know, the show premise was great, but the amount of time that, I mean, you go to a place for 4 days and think you're gonna, if that, and think something's gonna magically happen. Amy, there's true stories behind that. We can maybe that'll be a show for another time, but anyway, and so yeah, it went 12 seasons. 2011, there were exactly 100 episodes. I did turn it on for that 100th episode because I wanted to see how things had gone, and they really hadn't changed all that much. So, but Bigfoot, like it or not, folks, um, you have to give them credit because of the fact that finding Bigfoot made talking about Bigfoot, whether you found him or not, fun. It made it a lot of different words. It made it acceptable. It did get people's stories out there. You know, some of the uh, expeditions may have been goofy, but you know, the fact that people's stories were real and people got to tell their stories and the viewers got to hear stories that were very similar to their own stories. And so people were able to start coming out a little bit that had been sitting on their own stories. You know, I didn't talk about my experience for 30 years, but once it became more social and you weren't going to be, you know, called crazy and slapped in a straitjacket and sent to Waverly Hills or wherever, sanitarium, more and more people started talking about it. So Bigfoot started to gain popularity again. And even more so because now we got the internet. You know, I mean, if you think about it, in 2005, Steve Chen, Chad Hurley, Jod Turing set the stage for something pretty amazing to happen and founded YouTube. So once YouTube hit and people were figuring out how to use it and putting up videos they had and creating channels, uh, the longer Finding Bigfoot was on, the more popular it became. I mean, it still had good ratings. And then by the time Finding Bigfoot was winding down, Expedition Bigfoot picks up without the comedic, you know, kind of a different approach, even though the whole algorithm thing and their special supercomputer to do that, you know, give me a break. They don't have us. We can do the same thing on our phone. You can go to the, you know, Bigfoot mapping project on your app on your phone and get all the same data and figure out your own little algorithm for your supercomputer that will tell you where your Amy, I must correct. Waverly Hills was tuberculosis. My grandma was there. Sorry, Amy, I didn't mean to use that. Just the fact that it was an asylum. So, oh, it was not an insane asylum. Oh, well, see, that's why I would like people to call me out to correct me. So, what's the famous insane asylum everybody goes and sees then? I know Waverly Hills is haunted. That's a big place to go. Hmm. Anyway, if anybody knows what the big insane asylum is, then. But anyway, so Expedition Bigfoot picks up, and Amy again apologized. And Bigfoot gains even more traction because the ratings are better. No, it's okay. Very long time ago. Thank you, Amy. And YouTube starts picking things up. And we start seeing more and more channels pop up. We start seeing more and more Bigfoot research groups pop up, doing their own investigations. And maybe these lurked in silence before, but now with the advent of YouTube, you're able to put your work out there and get your name out there. And there are some amazing things that have come through from YouTube. I mean, like it or not, we got to give credit to this one for, you know, finding Bigfoot. I believe they were the first ones to air this. You know, it looks like the comparison of the guy compared to something that was stealing apples out of his yard, I believe, if I remember right. And there's supposed to be a baby tucked in here. So the size difference is pretty dramatic. But thanks to YouTube and the internet, that picture is going to live forever now. You know, and this is what kept the interest in Bigfoot not only going, but growing. You've got this picture from the year 2000, the Mayaca skunk ape. Now, there's a sketchy backstory behind it, and that's something that, if you're interested in, you can. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the funny thing was, this was supposedly stealing fruit off a lady's backyard in Mayaca, in Florida, and it happened to be Michigan apples from her daughter bringing them down. She goes out the back door, just snaps a blind picture, and there's actually two of these. I only put one up, but there's actually two, and you can actually see the jaw move between the two. Some people say it's a cutout, but I don't know how you would get the jaw to move in the two. But this gets the internet buzzing because these come out in 2000. And there's some, the internet's full of crazy things, just like, and the Patterson Gimlin film starts getting more and more Midwest Bigfoot researchers, the eye shine. Oh, yeah, got the eye shine here. And then supposedly, I cropped this a little bit. There's supposed to be some more eye shine over here. So they even talk about a second one being there now. But, and you got the mouth open and you look at the teeth, which I'm going to put this picture up now because if you want to hear about an incredible ongoing events between 75 and 78, you need to go over to Midwest Bigfoot Researchers and watch his story. This is Randy's picture, and the story's incredible. And this got the internet hopping too. I'm even finding videos, even though he hasn't made a video in quite a while, videos about his story are still popping up. So this is probably the most incredible, I don't want to say crazy because that sounds bad, but incredible one you will hear about that I know of. So this is right up there. He's got the stuff to back it up. Go watch it. And this is his drawings. So anyway, so shout out to Randy for letting me use that. Thank you, my friend. And Amy AI is making it very hard. I mean, look, that's AI. And so more and more photos are popping up now than ever. But before AI came along, they had the Patterson Gimlin film got more and more traction because the technology was getting better. So the fact that Midwest Bigfoot Researchers thanks be, hey, you bet, my friend, you go watch his channel, folks. Anyway, technology gets better, and some of these photos are, they're giving more, and then some of them are, catching a little flack too. Some of them aren't what they appear to be. And this one cracks me up. We'll go over this one first because since they've been able to stabilize and analyze that Patterson Gimlin film, this is what Patty looks like. This isn't AI recreated. This is a digital quote unquote enhancement, but it's from this one right here. Those decals are in here thanks to the film and thanks to being able to blow it up and look at it closer. You go from this, to this. So Patterson Gimlin film gives up more information. It's the second most viewed piece of film in history. First is obviously the Zapruder film with the JFK incident. Now, there have been people trying to take away from it. People still trying to debunk. And we've got with good information. Unfortunately, when something starts to become popular, you're going to get the good We get the good reports, we get the good information, we get stuff like Midwest Bigfoot researchers shared with us. We get the Patterson Gimlin film enhanced, but then we get clowns like this. Meet Mr. Oh, where's his name? I want to call him Hippopotamus, but that's not right. Bob Haramus. There we go. So this gentleman claims that this face is an exact recreation of the costume he wore to be the subject of the Patterson Gimlin film. This man claimed to be Patty, as she's known. So he was paid, I forget how much money, and decided he wanted to come forward after being paid said money to debunk the Patterson Gimlin film. He claims that Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin paid him $1,000, which, if we know the history, we know Roger Patterson, because if you go back in time, $1,000 back then would be something like 10 grand today for 2 hours of work. And those guys didn't have that kind of money. Let's be real. I mean, Roger Patterson had to get a small, I think, a loan from a bank just to rent the camera and rent the crew to go up there. So he claims this is this. Let's do that again. That head is that head. And let's keep in mind the fact that this head was made in 1999, I do believe. They tried to they paid him to, and another gentleman, to recreate that costume. So that costume was done, yep, in 1999. So the fact that it was 32 years later, pardon my addition, sucks. Let's just go to the comparison. They didn't have spandex back then in 1967. They didn't have muscle suits. Amy WC, I don't think so. People can also pay him to be the debunker. Exactly. And this is what I think happened. I think he had wanted to prove that film wrong because they tried to recreate that suit in 1999. And I'm going to show you the comparison photo. On the left is the best they could do, with 32 years of technology behind them. On the right is the original Patterson Gimlin film. Obviously, it's been touched up, but nothing added to it, just some of the graininess taken out. You can see the bicep, the hamstring, the quadricep. We got, I'll just see, woobies floating around there. And then we got the guy on the left, which is why I call him a hippopotamus, because that's as close as he's going to get to being a patty. I mean, so with good publicity, you're going to get bad publicity. This guy wanted to try to cash in, make Patterson and Gimlin look stupid or like liars and fakes. And so he got his press time, but it never gained a lot of traction. Skeptics, of course, latched straight onto it. You know, they thought, hey, this has got to be it. Now there's some, hopefully I can get these without messing up too badly here. But yeah, so Finding Bigfoot comes out. People are more and more into it. YouTube latches on. More and more people start putting videos out. The fact that we start getting festivals because Bigfoot or he simply gets his 5 minutes of fame. Yeah, he had an axe to grind if you look into his history with Bob Dylan and um, Roger Patterson, Amy WC, so many motivations. Yeah, there's too many to overlook. And his story is inconsistent. I forget how many interviews he did, but something changed in every breaking interview. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. So we'll get rid of some of these that we already looked at and try to find us some new ones that I took. Let's see. This one. This one was really interesting. Photos like these start popping along. And as far as I know, this one has not been debunked yet. People try to say MK Davis did a really good one on it. So Wave Green 2020, I believe. Green Wave 2020. You can see his analysis, and MK obviously did some amazing work on the Patterson Gimlin film with the stabilization and everything. He actually finds where there's some red going down, this dark hair that could possibly be some blood. So I don't know why people would fake that, but to me, this one looks pretty darn good with the fact that you got no neck hair, a big ear, nice long hair, with the fact that you can see skin through it. So if somebody put together a costume, they either ran out of money or did a really phenomenal job at realizing that, not all of them, as they get older, are going to retain all their hair. So let's find another one for us to look at for why Bigfoot maintained its popularity, because more and more pictures were starting to pop up. People were starting to share stuff. Well, obviously we know who Patty is. And with people sharing more, not everybody was getting heckled. People were starting to believe them. They're starting to go on you get podcasts. Now you get witnesses being interviewed. You're able to start being anonymous and getting the stories read. Now, is that a good thing all the time? Not necessarily, because is somebody writing the stories, or did that actually happen to somebody? So that's one of the things you got to worry about as far as when you're listening. Did somebody write it, or was it true? And I tend to try to give most of them, due credit. Hopefully things are true. How to Hunt's got a lot of good stuff, but again, sometimes you just gotta wonder on some things. Just like anything else, you should always do it with a healthy dose of skepticism. Obviously sometimes, even I'm wrong when I talked about Waverly, so that shows you right up in advance that sometimes regurgitated information isn't always the best information to listen to. But with Bigfoot keeps gaining popularity, more photos come out, more people share it. Now we got even Bigfoot with saxophones on TikTok. The fame has grown. We've got Bigfoot festivals. We've got, look at this guy. We got Jiffy in the background. So, plush toys are everywhere. And so he's become kind of a cultural icon if you think about it. You've got him in the Bionic Man back in the day. That was one of my favorite episodes that stands out. I can't remember many of those, but the ones with I had dinner with Bob Gilman. We talked for an hour more. The guy took a lot of stuffing. He told the truth. There was no guy in a suit. That's absolutely what I believe. And so now you've got Bigfoot being on TikTok. You've got Bigfoot being YouTube. I mean, it makes you wonder how many videos are Bigfoot. I mean, all the organizations that are popping up now. So not only are people taking it seriously, but he's everywhere. He's, a superstar. He's probably got more followers than, I don't know if the Kardashians are even still relevant. Amy WC, I can't believe how many Bigfoot. Yeah, exactly. I didn't even touch on merchandising, bumper stickers, etc. We even have Bigfoot donuts with huge wooden carved Bigfoot in the dining area. Yeah, I remember seeing the Bigfoot burger. And Amy WC, this is Northern Alabama. Michigan's you've got your Bigfoot t-shirts, and for something that's supposed to be so fake, it's picked up so much steam. And I know sometimes there's other things but at the same time that he's grown in popularity, um, with people in general, so has Midwest Bigfoot Research. Got to go feed Eddie. If you don't know who Eddie is, folks, again, go watch Randy's channel, because you'll get to see who Eddie is. Good night, my friend. Thank you for stopping in. And I don't know. It makes you wonder who makes the merchandise and where it goes. I mean, you've got coins. We've got obviously stuffed animals, T-shirts, socks, ornaments. I've got a Bigfoot ornament laying around here somewhere. Here we go. This little guy from Texas that my mom got me. He's even got his own little story and history. So, look at that guy. So we've literally gone into, look, Amy's going to look and see Eddie. Amy, you're going to love it. So we went from, I mean, think about it. We went from the hairy man from 500 to 1,000 years ago to Jiffy, to TikTok star, to AI star, and people trying to hoax to get their 5 minutes of fame. Bob Hippopotamus there. Rick Dreyer, there's a famous one, had the Bigfoot body that was frozen and was going around the nation. Remember that whole thing till you got busted? But that's the other thing with the internet. If you're hoaxing, you're going to get caught. There are mistakes that are made too with some of the technology. People are having to take down videos because I'm trying to find this. I wish I'd have named these better. There's a Bigfoot photo that a lot of people put a lot of faith in, and now with the advancement of technology, we're finding out we made mistakes, and I'm just as guilty. I thought that this one was the real deal, and it's not. It's a little pareidolia coming in to haunt us. This one right here, boy, I got lucky on that one. So this one looks like a great picture to me of a Bigfoot sitting. But now that they're able to touch these photos up and lighten them up, it's actually a bear and a cub. We got the back end of the bear. Oh, I don't have a cursor, but you can see the back leg going up over the hump, and another bear's in front of it. He's got his head down. So this one's coming back to haunt us. But again, the fact that so many people are looking at these photos proves the popularity of the subject. And so Bigfoot has really gone from myth and legend to TikTok star. And oh, who's the one, the whole superstar? Remember her? So, I don't think there's ever been anything else like it. You got Loch Ness Monster as well doing that. So to me, it's people's fascination with the unknown. People want to believe in something that's, to some people, sketchy to believe in, but those of us who have experienced it have no problem believing in it. And now we're able to share our stories. Yeah, we'll still get some backlash, but it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to catch heat from somebody. There's people who aren't going to believe it, even if Bigfoot walked up and give them a big French kiss. It's just the way it is. And we have to accept that and be willing to take that heat, especially with the internet. And you've got the people who can, oh, not talking about fake. So here, you can go eat this. And then if you're happen to be at a convention or something, they're going to be, oh, hey, you're so-and-so, walk up and shake your hand and everything else. But, that's the dangers of also being media. So we've taken a little trip on whole AMWC. Most people haven't had at least one story of something absolutely inexplicable. And the beauty of it is now, Amy, is they can share it. They're not going to get ridiculed and lose their job like the sheriff did in Benzie County back in the 80s, where, he got elected by a landslide. He was one of the most popular sheriffs. And then he saw and reported a Bigfoot. And in the next election, his less than popular opponents used that, saying he was crazy, he was delusional, he's not fit to be a sheriff if he's seeing Bigfoot in Benzie County. And then he lost by a landslide in the next election. So we've gone from matter of fact back in the Native Americans to, okay, maybe in the 50s and 60s, to people who wanted to be okay with it but got slammed so bad that they sat on their stories in the 70s, cute and cuddly in the 80s. And then it took till 2011 and finding Bigfoot to popular. And now we got YouTube. And Amy, I hate to hear about the sheriff. Yeah, I mean, and there are still a lot of forest rangers and military now that had to wait till they retired to come forward with stuff. There's a whole thing I just watched on Camp Pendleton, and retired people's stories from there. I personally know a DNR officer that worked on a place called Drummond Island for over 20 years, and he saw two. Was not allowed to talk about it, will not come on the show to talk about it publicly, because I don't know if it was something like an NDA, but if he talks about it, he could lose his pension. So, obviously you can't ask people that are under that kind of pressure to come on the show and talk about it. But the fact that so many other people who don't have that pressure and can come out and make it and make cute t-shirts. I wore that t-shirt last week with Bigfoot being beamed up by the UFOs. Any ghost, UFO, Bigfoot, unreal coincidence, etc. Yeah, I mean, it's all, amazing, and that people want to believe, but then when you do believe, you get harassed for believing. So it's kind of a weird paradigm that they're doing. And oh, here, quick Bigfoot joke I made up just for you guys. So, Bigfoot jokes. Hey, there's another one. Uh, three people go out in the woods. You got a Bigfoot knower, you got a Bigfoot skeptic, and a Bigfoot non-sayer, we'll say. And they get convinced. Bigfoot knower takes them out in the woods. Tragic car crash. You all wind up at the pearly gates. And St. Peter looks at him and says, wow, you guys have all had pretty sketchy lives. It's kind of 50-50 which way we should go here. And so I'm going to ask you a question. If you answer the question right, you'll get in. Goes to the believer. Says, okay, What was the name of the ship that hit the iceberg and sank? I believe it says Titanic. Goes to the second person, the skeptic, 50-50 on Bigfoot. How many people were on the Titanic when it hit the iceberg? And he says, men, children, and crew, 2,200. Okay, you get in. Goes to the non-believer and says, name them. But anyway, so see, even jokes are Bigfoot now. And what's not a joke is the money it's generating for somebody or somebody's. And also forcing men of election and women of election to come out and admit they've got files from the 70s and they've got audio recordings and they've got in the Library of Congress of witnesses. So the Amy, I hope somebody found it funny. I mean, it's just indescribable how something most, I shouldn't say most, because now the tide's finally turned in our favor, folks. We're winning. More people believe in Bigfoot than not, or at least I believe the percentage was 38, and then a bunch were on the fence, and very few were just like, no, it doesn't. So we're starting to win the reality war, if you want to call it that. So there were some pictures. And again, more of these pictures are going to keep coming out. We're going to keep, there's some really cool ones that I think the show next week will be about some of these pictures and go over them and new findings on them, because I got to admit, this one had me. So for a couple of years now, and I'm going to look and see if Thinker Thunker took his video down, because he confirmed it was a Bigfoot. And there was one other video that he did confirming a Bigfoot, and he took it right down when the analysis came back. So we'll see if his video's still up on this one. The public relations war. There we go, Amy. Perfect. Touchdown. So next week we'll look at pictures and we'll do the history on them, my reaction, and then we'll see if that reaction still stood the test of time and technology. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody coming in and chatting with me. It's always good, you know, and the fact that we get to talk Bigfoot, the fact that, I mean, here we go on a platform, YouTube, talking Bigfoot, and not getting thrown in the loony bin, you know, or called insane, or all these other nasty things that happen. We are in new territory, and we're going to take advantage of it by being able to talk about this. And sooner or later, I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but it'll come out. Again, it's going to take time, more time than I have left. But as Amy said, the public relations war is going in our favor, folks. And so hopefully everybody has a terrific night. Have a terrific weekend. Happy Mother's Day to everybody whose mom, stepmom included, grandmoms, everybody. Happy Mother's Day, and we will see you all next week. As everybody else says on the channel, coast to coast, around the world, have a great night.
It's a grizzly.
Should we get out of here?
No, we're gonna watch and listen. It's a grizzly.
Oh, shit, should we run?
No.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, should we run?
Okay. It's a grizzly.
Are you sure it's not a chipmunk?
Action.
I'm out of here.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
I'm out of here.
Huh. Maybe it is a chipmunk. It's a grizzly.
Are we gonna die?
I don't know. We're just going to sit here and listen and watch.
Let's get out of here, maybe.
Fall!